So welcome to the presentation. Again, my name is Jessica Crow, and I am the founder of Apogy. It's a change management training, coaching, and consulting firm. And today's workshop is for change leaders and practitioners who are sort of new to forming a change function, who want to take the next step in terms of building a change team or a capability within the organization. And I thought it would be helpful to look at this from the perspective of a startup, because the process of producing and launching a new product or service, there's a lot that we as change professionals can learn from that experience in this context. So just a little bit about me and to kind of explain where I'm coming from, my experience with being in a startup. Prior to starting Apogy, I spent about 17 years in different roles in the corporate setting. So I have experience in high tech and real estate and healthcare, and high tech certainly has a startup vibe. And when I was in real estate, they were pioneering sustainable development. But my first real foray into the startup world was with a company, an information security company called Acuva. Now, at the time, it was more than, I wasn't getting at the ground floor by any means, but it hadn't yet matured in terms of where it is at now, $1 billion company. But I got to experience what it was like to be in an organization that was figuring out who it was, how it did the work, and all of those growing pains. So there wasn't a CEO, there was no HR team. There was a lot of everybody kind of figuring it out, all hands on deck. And that was a really great learning experience that helped me in my next role when I went to DaVita, which is a healthcare company, where I was asked to start the change management team within that organization. So they knew about change management, and this was a decade ago. Change management has been around for quite some time, and they wanted to start to formalize change management within their IT department. So I was embedded within the IT organization. It was myself and one other individual, and over time we grew that team within IT. And now today, over a decade later, the change management capability is no longer within IT. It's its own standalone function, supporting all of the needs, all of the business teams within the business. So it took some time to go from being a discrete function within a function to being something that had more of an enterprise support model. And then my true startup experience is with Apogy. I started Apogy in 2019 as the founder, and I've had the opportunity to work through all of the roles. I've been doing things from setting up the website and all the backend to building the course and testing that MVP. So I've really brought a lot of my own personal experience to bear in this training and this workshop today. And you'll see that, kind of reflected in how I'm guiding this conversation. So for today, the goals are to get on the same page first with a quick overview of key change management frameworks, just so we're all on the same page. I'll teach you how to think like a startup. So we'll talk about the startup mindset and how to use that when designing your change strategy and plans for your function. And then I'll offer some actionable strategies to help you make progress with your goals and objectives. So we will jump right in. And I'm assuming that you joined the workshop because you understand change management, the value, the potential to have a positive impact in your organization. And whether you realize it or not, you're already starting to think like a startup operator. Most startups are born from ideas to improve or disrupt the status quo. So you saw a need, you're taking steps to address a problem with a solution that adds value, that helps end users do something better differently. And the early days of starting a change team bear semblance to the early days of launching a new product or service. The main difference is who you're trying to convince to buy or buy into what it is that you are offering. Now, really quickly, I want to check my microphone. Perfect. Okay. Just to make sure we're recording this okay. Yep, here we go. All right, so before we jump into the tips and strategies, let's get into that baseline foundation and align on why change management matters in the workplace. So change is how business strategy gets delivered, and all change has to go through people to get executed, which is why change management plays such an important role in the outcome. So without change management, things can take longer, there's more friction, and you increase the risk of failure in terms of the project, which can result in more costs, rework, and so forth. So art is a framework. Change management, like any business discipline, has frameworks to help practitioners remember what to do. So if you're in marketing, you've got SMART or SWOT. You've got art for ProSci has ADKAR and Apogee has art. So art represents the goals and outcomes for lasting individual change. So aware, do people understand what is changing and why, and the business reasons for the change? Ready, do employees and stakeholders feel supported? Are they willing to change? Are they bought into the idea of changing? And then trained is really about the knowledge and skills. Do they have what they need to be successful operating in the new environment? Art really helps guide the strategy and the planning process, and it ensures that change leaders and teams prioritize what people need to both feel and be successful. Another framework within the change management process that Apogee has outlined is define, design, deploy. And instead of focusing on what people need to make the shift, it guides a strategy and planning for change management at the organization level. So it's both practical, it's tactical, it provides clear steps on what to do next, and it really serves as the foundation for a change function. It transforms your conversation from being, hey, we need change management, to here's how we do change management in our workplace. So what happens when there's a lack of change management? This may be stating the obvious. You may be experiencing this yourself, but a lack of change, oversight for the way change works has negative consequences. When there's competing priorities, people aren't sure what to do first. And so there's a lack of progress on any number of initiatives. That siloed and non-collaborative workplace, this is where teams are rolling out changes without thinking about the impacts of what they're doing and how other changes may be happening, sort of the universe of change. And that can create stress, overwhelm, and burnout. And actually, I was reading a study, a recent report called the Great Resignation Update. And this may not be affecting you in South Africa, Pascal, but definitely here in the United States, we've had a mass exodus of people moving out of roles and into other organizations, or not even having a job lined up. And it said that nearly 30% of people who left their jobs this year did not have another position lined up. And the reasons for leaving was 40% said due to burnout, and 34% said organizational changes. And then there was other reasons as well, but those are pretty significant indicators of why, and it really underscores the value proposition of why change management is so important in the workplace. So I'll pause. Any questions so far?
No, none, but I must say that it's also the same thing here in SA. We very much the same thing. So yeah, I can definitely relate.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's been an interesting year, that to say the least. Interesting several years, to be totally honest. But here we are.
Here we are.
Okay. Now, when it comes to change management, I think the obvious question is, why would so many organizations underclub or just kind of miss the mark when it comes to change management? And the reason most often is because leadership, they underestimate the impact of change on employees. So senior leaders, they're typically involved in the decision-making process, while that frontline worker, that analyst level in some cases, they are the last to know, but yet the first that are expected to change. And that's where that conflict, that tension comes in, that disconnect between what needs to happen in between to help the people who are impacted by the change make the transition, because you've got the other group within the organization that's like already bought in, they're ready to go. So that's where change management comes in. That's the value of forming a change function and standardizing on change process and techniques within an organization. And it's also where the startup mindset can come in handy. So the startup mindset, build, test, measure, learn. This is really the tenets of, and it underscores how to stay nimble, how to adjust and develop your program based on feedback that you're getting from key partners and stakeholders in the organization. And the value of taking this approach is that instead of trying to build a fully loaded function with all the bells and whistles, you've been through training, let's say, that change management has all this potential, it can be all these things. Instead of going right out the gate and saying, here's what we need, you take a step back and you iterate and you just try things on, like, how does this work in my company with my unique situation, with the unique culture that we have here? And you just sort of, you make adjustments as you go, and you actually make progress faster because you're learning and adapting what you think to what really the needs of the business are. Going in the wrong direction. Okay, to that end, before you build anything, you should also be clarifying the problems that you're solving for. So even if you understand the value of change management, you want to get specific about the issues within your organization that you are going to address with a change management capability. So a gap analysis, this is an example of a gap analysis. It's a useful exercise to go through to clarify what the specific problems are. So you can start by saying, here's the current state, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I believe the ideal future state could look like. And then you work your way into explaining, well, what's missing, right? Why are we not here? And you kind of map that out. And then you think about your target market. So these are the people or the personas that will benefit most from the formation of a change function and the implementation of change management best practices within the organization. And the value of mapping all of this out front before you build anything, before you get started, is it'll make it easier for you to determine what needs to go into your MVP. So your MVP in the startup world is minimum viable product, but in this context for this workshop, MVP stands for minimum viable program. And your minimum viable program is the service that your change team or function would provide to the business, which means the next step is getting even more clear about what those needs and the opportunities are. So at this point, you want to ask yourself, what are the pain points? What is missing from the current approach? Maybe go back to the gap analysis if you created one as a starting point. And this is going to help you, again, figure out what needs to go into your minimum viable program. Now, what to include in your minimum viable program. This is what outlines what your team will offer in terms of services and support. And you want to be able to test what you believe would benefit the organization in action, get feedback, and then improve it as you go. So you don't need to include everything, right? Just choose a few, I'll call them features, and I'll explain that in a second, you want to get feedback on. So the idea is to be nimble and prioritize getting that feedback versus trying to build that fully stacked function right out of the gate. So a wireframe, if you have any background in software development, it provides a visual representation of the software before it's built. And change professionals and practitioners can take a similar approach by documenting the core components of the change capability, the change team, what you will do, what you will own and manage. And in this case, I've mapped this to Apogy's change management process. So it includes core components within each step in that process of define, design, and deploy. When I mentioned features a moment ago. So a feature is an attribute of a product or service. It's something desired by stakeholders, desired by end users. And the best way to think about a change management function is that it is a support function providing a service to the business. So your features could be, you will develop an overall strategy for the projects and programs that you will support. You'll create coaching plans and work with leaders and managers and offer that coaching. You'll create the communications plan on all the tactics. So it's what you will do. It provides more context, and it builds on that blueprint, that wireframe that you created, previously. So it's more detail into what you're going to do and how. And of course, it's helpful to explain how you're going to do all of this, your approach. So at each stage in the process, what will you do to create the deliverables, so the features that you've outlined as being critical for your minimum viable program? And my recommendation is start as small as possible. So maybe you say my MVP is going to be working with stakeholders to define the impacts of the change and coming up with that body of work. Or maybe it's my MVP is managing the communication strategy and plan and ensuring that end users are aware and ready for whatever the change might be. Be okay with adding on as you go, and just taking like small steps to get some reps in and create some small wins for yourself, because this is how you'll build that case, build that story for why change management, formalizing a change function in your organization makes sense. So I'll pause again. Any questions?
Yes and no, but it's a bit off topic.
No, go for it.
So what happens if the business that you're implementing change management for is very waterfall, that they're very much against agile, and they're not willing to do something and then look back and say, okay, this is working or this isn't working, let's reassess? How do you then handle that?
I'm glad you asked that question, actually, because the topic of agile change management, waterfall. So my background in software development, we waterfall and agile were both present in the organization that I was at. And I'll say, when it comes to change management, and I actually just read an article about this too, there's really no such thing as waterfall or agile change management. The best way to think about this is, how can you engage? So your purpose as a change leader is to facilitate individual transitions that will be impacted by whatever the change is. So if you're in an environment that's building software where it's getting all the requirements, and then eventually, it's developing it, and then it's going to launch it and get all the feedback, then you still have an opportunity to share the vision, to find a small cohort of people and test and take this MVP approach with them. So if you're building a piece of a feature or a function, and that it's going to serve the needs in some way, that's the vision that you share, and you get their feedback. And this is where you can, get feedback on, do you think this is going to add value? Like, what are you looking for? What would be helpful to you in your current workflow? And it may not be developed within that time frame, but at least you're aware of, and you know what to expect in terms of pushback, in terms of future enhancements. And so, yes, you can, if it's a waterfall approach, it may be more static than fluid. However, there's still an opportunity to iterate as a change professional on your communications, on the key messages, on what you think the benefits are. Because when that functionality, that feature is finally available, then you'll be able to really pressure test, is this the right message? Is this the right benefits? Did we create the training to actually, are we missing anything? Does that help answer your question? And if you've tried that before, but it hasn't been successful, I'd be interested, what were the barriers?
Yeah, that does help a lot. So currently I'm working with a client that is very old school in the way that they manage a project. And we've come in to do testing for their systems, and they don't want to listen to anything that we're suggesting. Mm-hmm. So we'll even come back with a new process or a new way of working, and they'll say no, but this and this. So it's like we've got a lot of pushback, and we can't relate to their values because it's very much all over the place,
right?
And they're a massive organization, so managing to get everybody into the same room is so hard. So I'm just curious to know, what has worked in the past.
And when so let me ask a different question. Do you have an ally or a sponsor or someone that you are partnered with in the organization that understands kind of your thinking and change management as you understand it?
Yeah, there is, and he's the COO. However, he doesn't sit with us in those calls and in those meetings. So we have to kind of go back to him and say, this is what's happened. And then you'll say, okay, let's go and speak to these people. So it's a really slow process. But I think eventually it will, like, people will start getting, excuse me, behind what we're doing. But yeah, it's really, really, really slow. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat.
No, that's okay. I mean, so a couple of ways to approach that. One, it would be helpful if the COO was, we call it active and visible, right? If they had some sort of involvement or some sort of communication engagement with the individuals, the teams, the lanes that you are trying to influence with the work that you're doing. Now, it's not to say that they're going to go from waterfall to agile in terms of their project management or development. Like, that's not something that can change overnight. That being said, the COO can help embed, your team more closely with the influential leaders and managers that are doing the work in the waterfall methodology. So, or, just taking whatever, or if it's project management, not necessarily software development. So my suggestion would be partner with the COO, see if you can get that individual to engage in a different way. And then start small, scale smart. Find people within the teams and lanes that you're trying to get them to think differently about the work that you're doing. And try out something small, like, hey, you've got this update coming up, or this piece of functionality, or whatever it is happening. Try to wrap change management around even the smallest of changes and see if you can, get some lift in that way. Do you think that would be helpful in terms of your process and approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the way that it is going at the moment. So it will be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, no, keep me posted on that. That's a tough situation to be in when you're trying to change the mindset and beliefs and behaviors of a large organization that's very set in their ways and do something new and different. But you're on the right track, it sounds like, in terms of making those, small adjustments and hoping that over time that becomes something more bigger and noticeable. And yeah, hopefully you can utilize the COO and also the people that are impacted by the work that is being delivered from the teams you're trying to influence. So the end users who are being asked to change or use whatever it is that's, being rolled out, getting their feedback can speak volumes in terms of changing minds and attitudes around what needs to happen differently, especially if you have data points around, people are leaving the organization, or there's been increase in costs because of project delays. Find those data points that can help support your case, and then find those people who are willing to validate, yeah, this isn't working and here's why. And then, it'll take time to pull it all together, but that's one way to approach it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question. Cool. Okay, we'll keep going then. But yeah, please feel free to stop me if you have any other questions related or, tangential that you think of. When it comes to creating your change team MVP, another step in the process is figuring out what resources you need to be successful. So in the beginning, if it's just you might be playing all of the roles. You might be doing the impact assessments and creating the communications and developing the training and executing the plans. And that's very normal in the startup phase. But no matter what your starting point is, where you go next is finding that product market fit. So when you were asking, like, how can I it's a waterfall and what do I do next? Finding that product market fit means finding those allies within the organization and working with them and getting some momentum from that experience, and then sharing that with other teams and individuals in the organization. So to that end, many startups, many change functions fail because they spend a lot of time and effort creating something that no one wants to buy or doesn't meet the needs of the business. So your MVP really gives you an opportunity to prove the value of the services that you're providing before you attempt to scale them. So testing is really important here because it gives you the opportunity to evaluate the effectiveness, avoid costly mistakes, confirm what works, and also find ways to improve. The goal is to figure out what's working and what isn't with that small subset of employees. And really it is what is working and what isn't. Why isn't this making the impact or producing the outcomes that are expected? And by doing so, you can learn a lot and then, prepare yourself to take on more of the change management activities at the organization level. But by bringing it down to a smaller, more manageable experience. It's going to give you a lot of lessons learned that you can use and build on in the future. And one way to do this, and maybe your first starting point, is to test it with key partners within the organization. So not necessarily impacted stakeholders, but people that you would align with, and getting their feedback on, hey, is this the right approach? Are we thinking about this correctly? Do you have resources within your lane that could support the effort? Do you have projects that could benefit from change management support? It's all about getting scrappy and figuring out how to engage and work with the individuals in the organization so you can test out your ideas and your approach and get, like I said, get those wins and build that business case for here's what's working and here's the difference between what we were doing before and now what the experience and outcomes are now that we've started to apply change management in this context. And something to be aware of too, you do need buy-in from all levels in the organization for an effective and stable change function. And it has to remove the, pain points and reduce friction, but there's going to be people who never get it, right? Those are your laggards. They are used to tradition. They are not risk takers. And that's going to be a small portion, but that may be kind of who you're bumping into now. You want to find those innovators, those early adopters that you can test your MVP with, that can give you feedback on what you're doing and what isn't, and give you ideas, especially those that are on the inside. Like if you're in a consulting role, you have a good perspective, but they're going to understand best all the nuances and intricacies of what it's like to work within the organization. So find those people who get it, they're bought in, and work with them to test your ideas and plans. And there's a lot of ways that you can get feedback from your key partners and your end users. You can do so through conversation. You can use surveys and systems data. And you want to collect the information before, during, and after you engage on the project, you engage on supporting the team or the effort. And this is how you'll be able to do that compare and contrast of what the experience was like with change management and what it was like without. And that includes the outcomes of the change itself. So here's what to look for when you're testing your MVP. You can get feedback on, was this the right strategy? Were the plans comprehensive? Did we use the right tactics for the size, scope, impact of the change? Were end users, were they aware, ready, and trained for what was coming next? In terms of the outcomes, were they better? Were they worse than with or without change management? You can ask questions like simple as satisfaction. Was this a better experience for you? Utilization, that's where you get in and take a look at the adoption of whatever the tool or system is from the back end. So there's lots of ways to take a look at and assess whether or not what you're doing is working, whether or not it meets the needs of the customers that you serve and the partners that you work with. And ultimately finding product market fit, it's, learning and making improvements is how you do that. It's not really a one and done process. So even if you've got something that you're ready to scale, just keep in mind each iteration gets better and better. And, that's something that even now, as being several years into Apogy, I'm continuing to improve and make enhancements to the training, the ongoing education content, because I'm getting really good feedback from end users on what to do differently. And that's just part of the process. So there's that. Okay. Building a change function also requires marketing and promoting the results of what you're doing. So just like a startup, your efforts are going to die on the vine if stakeholders can't connect the dots between what's changing, the benefits, and who's driving the positive improvements. So there's many pitfalls in the startup landscape. Failing to market through the right channels in the right way. That's a major barrier to success. That includes marketing to your boss, positioning the work and the value and getting their support, as well as the teams that you want to work with. So to maintain momentum and continue to build the case for your change function, you're going to need more projects to work on, more people to work with. So start by creating a plan to connect and engage with key leaders in the organization. And you want to make sure the messaging and the messages you use focus on the problems that you're solving for, and that you're engaging people in the right way through the right channels with the right message. So One way to go about this is who needs to know about the change function? Who needs to know about the work that you and your team are doing? Is it specific roles? Is it specific teams within the organization? Because again, you want to tie back the improvements, no matter how small the wins are in your mind, you want to be able to tie them back to the work that you are doing so you can generate more demand and interest in your services. So your marketing message is how you convey the value and the benefits. This should, again, what problems are you solving for? What are the benefits? And try to find produce quantitative and qualitative insights here. So that's when you get back to that measurement, right? Before, during, after. What kind of improvements are you driving? What is the value there? Get some sound bites from end users who's like, this is great, right? Put some quotes together that you can share with different lanes and teams that you are working with. And you can stay organized by creating a timeline and plan. This will ensure that you're doing the things that you believe would be helpful to creating that change team within your company. Maybe your strategies to do a roadshow. Maybe it starts with educating leaders and managers on what is change management and what is the value and how can change management support the business no matter what the project or delivery life cycle looks like. It can also be less formal. You can meet with people one-on-one and just socialize how you add value that way. The point is you need some level of marketing to ensure the value of what you're doing or can do gets noticed. So with that, this might be, so there's lots of ways to kind of create a change capability within an organization. I've seen it several different ways. I've been a part of centralized and decentralized and hybrid. So no matter where this ends up, it's just helpful to be open to how it looks within your organization, because that's going to increase the likelihood of success of getting change management standardized and formalized and rolled out across teams and the business. So one thing that you could do to sell the idea of a change management function, get approval from your senior leadership team, is to create a presentation that pitches what you're trying to do and map out like what is the opportunity, what your recommendation is based on your MVP testing, and then your key metrics are how you're going to measure and communicate continued success, as well as your timeline. So here's what we're going to do when, with the ultimate goal being, whatever it is, maybe it's adding to the team, maybe it's centralizing, maybe it's training a group of employees on change management so they can serve as change agents within the organization. But this is something that you can put in front of your leadership and show that you've done the work and you've thought through and you've gotten feedback on your ideas and get approval for whatever it is that you're recommending for your team. So with that, I will wrap up just by saying, as a change professional, as someone who's trying to kickstart change management and serve as a change leader in the organization, just keep in mind that it's going to take time. It's going to require continued effort, and everything that happens, use it as an opportunity to learn and grow, and just focus on what you're doing well and continue to do that, and don't give up. So that's the entire presentation. But do you have any questions for me related to either the presentation or really, you've got the mic if you have any other questions that you'd like to get answered?
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the first slides that you had on the different types of, can you go back to one of your first slides? Possible?
Yeah.
It was like right in the front. One forward. Oh, so you spoke about disruption, or the types of ways that you can introduce change management, and there's disruption and the other one. What was the other one?
This one? Or wait, introducing, let me see.
So my question was around, can there be a bad side to that disruptive persona? So if change management is coming in and it is disruptive, can there be a good side to it, and can there be a bad side to it? Because obviously disruptive is a negative word, right?
Right.
But
yeah, all change, positive or negative, is disruptive because it creates a shift, whether it's a big change, right? You're deploying an enterprise software, or it's all the small little changes that happen throughout the day and the week that create the volume. Like, it's all disruptive. So when you say, is there a positive and a negative? The answer is yes, it's sort of one and the same at the same time. Now, if a change is there's a reduction in force, or there's some sort of, you're taking away something, that's going to be a different experience than you're adding a feature. But even in, or doing something that's going to save people time or make it easier, they're still going to view that as being disruptive. The goal and the value of change management is that you are shortening that learning curve by empowering people with information, transparency, communication, and just that honesty of, hey, we know this is hard, we know this is happening, and or this is happening, and here's what you can expect. Because what people don't like is being surprised. They don't like not knowing or feeling like they're on the receiving end of something. They want to feel like they're a part of the change. And so part of that means, how do you maintain the vision, the purpose of the entire organization? Like, what are you trying to accomplish as a company? And then tying that back to what are the changes you're making that are going to impact the people that work there, and then tying their beliefs, their behaviors to that big picture vision. That's how you maintain that thread. So even if the changes are disruptive, which all of them will be, you can kind of bring them along that journey, that customer journey they'll go through, that change journey, because they'll know that by changing their behaviors, by being willing and open to change, whatever is required of them, they are serving and meeting the needs of the business, which ultimately serves and meets the needs of the customers that are consuming the products or services. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, but the best way to think about it is all change is disruptive, and the purpose of what you're doing is to lessen the impact of changes through transparency, engagement, collaboration, helping people feel like they belong, and that you understand and have empathy for what they're going through, just by having, through the activities that you're doing, the meetings, the communications, the support that you provide. Is that helpful? Was that responsive?
100%. I quite love that answer. My other question is, in terms of marketing, do you believe that the marketing is from end to end? So obviously, coming in with a bit of excitement, and then and then ending off the closing of change management after the training's been done and all that other stuff, ending off that product, say for instance, it's a product implementation, ending it off with a party or an advert of what's been done. Is that all part of change management, or is that bringing?
Absolutely. No, yeah, that's absolutely a part of change management. And that, the ending that you talked about, the ending with the party, the celebrating success, that can certainly happen at the end, but it should be happening without and during the process as well. Those milestones, finding those examples, those early, we talked about the innovators and the, let's see, where is it at? Here we go. So your innovators and early adopters, in Apogee refers to that persona, that group of individuals, as influencers. Working with them and sharing their stories of success is going to help draw those early majority, those late majority adopters. It's going to help them get there sooner. So yes, marketing the value, marketing the product from the beginning, the value of change management to the end, but definitely throughout as well. So yes, it's end to end. And then even after the project is closed, if your intent is to continue to provide change management on future projects, future efforts, then you want to continue to share those stories of success with the organization and tell, creating case studies and videos and stuff that promotes the work that you're doing. So, and, presentations, meeting with leadership teams. So there's lots that you can do to market it. It's internal marketing because your customers are internal customers. But yeah, I would think about it as an ongoing experience, an ongoing process.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all my questions.
Good. Well, I'm so glad you joined today, and I'm glad I got to answer some of your questions. If you have any others, please feel free to reach out to me. But thank you for making time today. And then this will be recorded. It is being recorded and will be sent out as a replay. So if you ever want to review it again, it's in Apogy's resource library. If you haven't signed up for that, that includes the other workshop replays and other tools that you can use. So yeah, thank you for making time today, and let me know if I can do